Hey, welcome to Talent Talk. It's Tuesday, and well, right now it's 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So that means it's time for me to bring in two fantastic guests and talk about talent. My favorite thing to talk about is how do we handle our talent better, and what can we learn from really talented people? And both are true today for both contexts of the word. I'm also really excited because this is the last show of June, because I'm going to be a little bit on a book tour and speaking tour to promote the recent book that just came out, Remote Work. Of course, my first book, The Power of Company Culture, which is filled with stories. They're both really filled with stories that we got from a lot of our guests here on the show, talking about what they went through, really sharing with us how they overcame adversity, their fantastic ideas, and how maybe they stumbled upon them. And that's really the crux of the show, is to have an interesting conversation with someone and hopefully allow them to share their wisdom, and for something to maybe really stick with you that you might take back to your company, that you might take back to your life and be able to apply it in some way to make things better. So that's really the intention here, and that's what we're going to try to do today. As I mentioned, we are live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. A lot of you kind of get us on the live broadcast, so thank you for being here. A lot of you, I would say actually most of you, get us on the podcast or the video cast. So make sure you subscribe to Spotify or iTunes or iHeartRadio, wherever you find us. If you want to watch us on video, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and then you'll be alerted every time a new episode is thrown up there. So certainly noticed a lot of people coming in on the video as well lately, and that's been a nice addition. With everyone being virtual, we've had less people in the studio. So actually, we've had nobody in the studio. So they've all been sort of in this new Zoom context, and that's been great to take advantage of. If you have any questions for my two wonderful guests today, don't forget Angela is live tweeting all the things that we say, links to books, links to profiles. So it's a great resource for you to maybe go back and grab that thing that you couldn't jot down as you were listening. So it is there for you. And we love to get your comments, your questions. You can agree with us, disagree with us. That's what Twitter's for. So we'd love to see you there. All right, my guest today, my first one will be Scott Miller. He's the former Chief Marketing Officer and EVP of Thought Leadership at FranklinCovey. I'm sure most of you know who FranklinCovey is. I certainly do. A great little company. I shouldn't say little, great big company. And then we'll bring in our second guest. He's returning to the show, Rick Girard, CXO of Stride Search and host of his own show on this platform, the Higher Power Radio. So he should be... he's no stranger to radio waves. And kind of based on already my interactions so far with Scott today, I don't think he's a stranger to this as well. So Scott, welcome to the show. How are you doing today, sir?
Chris, I'm doing well. Thanks for the platform and the spotlight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you tell everyone more about you? What are you doing now? What's important for us to know about you and your journey, and what you're focusing on that, might help people understand who they're listening to, who they're learning from today?
Well, I'm focusing on raising 3 boys with my wife. We have a 6-year-old, 9-year-old, and 11-year-old. So that is my number one responsibility. Sometimes I hit it out of the park and sometimes I strike out. But beyond raising 3 boys, I'm an author like yourself. I host the world's largest weekly leadership podcast called On Leadership with Scott Miller, very similar to yours. I speak, I write, I consult, I coach. I am a 25-year associate of the FranklinCovey company. Dr. Covey hired me and raised me from a front line to the C-suite, was the chief marketing officer for 8 years, and just released a new book called Marketing Mess to Brand Success. It is the second book in the 10-volume Mess to Success series. The first book was Management Mess to Leadership Success. And so I'm kind of on, like you, I'm on the road and on the tour now, promoting the book and talking about that across every platform that will have me.
Yeah, I know. It is a lot of fun. You get to meet a lot of people. I guess it was that term, kiss a lot of babies and shake a lot of hands. So, and I noticed all the great books there behind you. For anyone who's watching or on the video, you can see some of those in the background. So I guess if we kind of get into marketing, right? I guess that's kind of where your book is right now. Maybe we'll start there. Are sales and marketing meant to really function as one division in your mind, or separately?
Well, I might give door number 3. I think they're interdependent. I think in some cultures, some organizations, they might be best to be separate. I think in some organizations, they might best to be together. I think ideally, they definitely should work interdependently with each other. In my book, I write a lot about the fact that I think too often marketing operates separately from sales, right? They cook up boondoggles and they have their creativity and they want to express themselves, and they need to be able to closely align themselves with the company's money-making model. I don't think marketers spend enough time developing their business acumen as they do their creativity, understanding the nature of the business that they're in, as opposed to marketing channels. So I don't take to task, but I think inspire marketers to, understand the 5 parts of your business: margin, cash, velocity, customers, and growth, and be super attuned to and aligned with what does sales need. I think the biggest conflict in companies, the biggest cancer in organizations next to gossip, is the fighting that goes on between sales and marketing. So maybe they should be 2 independent divisions in terms of alignment, but they should be interdependent in terms of the leaders of those 2 divisions to make sure that sales is getting what they need from marketing. I believe, generally speaking, marketing should be in service to sales.
Yeah. Yeah. And marketing, I think, has a larger context than what we always give it credit for, right? Marketing can help with talent retention and talent acquisition.
Yes.
Right. And of course, sales doesn't have a lot to do with that.
Right.
So, how the company looks, how the company is being perceived out there in the space is on marketing. So I agree with you. I think it's just like a Venn diagram, right? There's this overlap, but they are 2 separate sort of circles coming together.
Well said. I was at a conference of CMOs, and one of the CMOs said, as a CMO, your chief role is the CRO, Chief Recruitment Officer, right? To build a brand that people want to come and work for and at and be loyal to. But if I was the Chief Sales Officer, I would want marketing doing that as well. I want them building brand and building a culture. But the fact of the matter is, you can't staple brand equity to the back of a bank deposit slip and fund payroll off of it. And that may be funny in a throwaway line, but there's truth to that. I just think, generally speaking, marketing needs to be in sales boat, rowing with them. And that's from a chief marketing officer. I just generally think that marketing doesn't understand enough the key drivers of their businesses. Not every time, not every marketer, but I think there's growth there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we have this all the time. So at the high level, we have marketing and sales very much connected and talking and working. But if you go down the channel, right, the people making the ads, the people making the art, and then the people who are calling and talking to people, they're not really talking.
Yeah.
Right.
They're not.
Right.
And lots of times for simple reasons. It could be alignment. It could be the physicality of where they sit. I was just interviewing a famous author, Ash Fontana. He wrote a new book called The AI First Company. He's an AI expert, artificial intelligence. And he said, one of the first things that CEOs should do is take the members of their AI teams that are usually off in dark closets and embed them with sales, embed them with marketing, embed them with operations, whether it's virtual or whether it's physical. I think the same should be done. Your marketing team should be in the midst of all parts of your company so they understand and hear what's really going on. What are the real challenges? What do the other divisions really need? It's important not to have marketing off on an island by themselves, physically or virtually.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird sort of interplay, a kind of what's the right mixture? Because you don't want them to understand each other's job to such a point that they're not doing a job. They're not spending all their time. Yeah. Right. And they're 2 totally different, I guess, abilities. And so, I would say my average salesperson has no interest in marketing. They want marketing. They love it, but they don't want to do it. Right. And my average marketing person would certainly not want to be following up with people and making sales calls and all that. But yeah, how do you get them to talk enough that they understand, where they're at and how to go back and forth? It's funny. I've had marketing people go, well, that lead just came in. You guys have already sent 5 emails and done 3 phone calls, right? And you're like, that's just not how it works. Like,
Right. And I don't think that marketing always knows what a lead is. What marketing might call a lead, the sales might call a waste of my time, right? So the better the relationships are, the better they know each other, they know each other's intents, then you'll have better alignment, interdependence with these 2 teams.
Well, we've seen some good successes to go back and analyze. This just comes from my perspective of positive inquiry, right? And try to have positive leadership, and we focus on what works, right? So what you focus on grows. And I also know if you focus on what works, you can do a lot more of it and stop worrying so much about all the negative stuff.
Yeah.
So we go back and say, well, all right, this quarter, who were all the clients that we got? Where did they go? What did they do? How did they come in? What worked? Right. And then can we go spend more money in there into those dollars, into those campaigns or things like that? And then take the rest of them that didn't work and ignore them. They're done. Go away. We don't need to beat a dead horse, like trying to make that add a little bit, but no, it didn't work. Right. And so is that the same kind of approach that you would suggest? Or we focus on what's working first? Or do you think there's some value in continuing to tinker, to A/B test and do things to try to, I guess, in areas that maybe haven't proven to be working yet?
This may sound convenient, but I think obviously you're always testing new ideas, and you're demonstrating humility to recognize where you might want to put your efforts. It might be someone else's idea. I love this quote from Dr. Covey. Humble leaders are more concerned with what is right than being right. And a lot of leaders, get hooked up into our egos. We find all kinds of confirmation bias or other kind of data that can prove our original idea. I was interviewing on my podcast Karen Dillon once. Karen Dillon is the former editor of the Harvard Business Review. And she co-wrote a book with Clayton Christensen called How Will You Measure Your Life? And in this book, Chris, they share some research from a fellow Harvard business professor that said that 93% of all organizations that achieve, quote, financial success do so with an emergent strategy, not the deliberate strategy they set out with. Think about that. Mm-hmm. Only 7% of the time, companies that are, quote, successful do so with their original idea. That's because those that are able to pivot and change their mind and be open to influence and test and have an idea that wasn't theirs. I mean, quite frankly, the Mess to Success book idea was not my idea. It was my 23-year-old's junior partner's idea. He said, you ought to write a book about all your messes, not just leadership, but marketing and job and sales and marriage and all of that. So my marriage isn't a mess, by the way, at least not today. But it's the leader that's open to other people's influence, including if they might be less in stature than you.
Right. Well, it's a great point. And it makes sense because if people are willing to change, I mean, I've known so many people that wanted to start a business or wanted to do something with their life, and they spent so much time preparing, trying to make it perfect. Right. And usually they never actually executed on the final product because they're always still trying to make it perfect. Or if they did, they were so late to the game, right? They were so late that it didn't matter, that everything had changed, everything had passed it by. I had an art teacher in junior high who for years was making his own boat. And I mean, just a little at a time, he was in the newspaper about it. He'd check on his progress. I think he spent 20 years building this boat. Well, something happened, and I think he had some something happen, an illness or something, and he decided he needed to make this. He sort of rushed it all of a sudden at the end. And do you know what happened to that boat on this big voyage with all the news media there, and people have been talking about this for 20 years?
Well, of course it sank.
It sank, right? And I was like, wow, this is like the perfect metaphor for like business, for people who just spend all this time trying to finally make it right. And they go, okay, I'll finally go. And it's silly. So,
I was interviewing Rachel Hollis once, the former author, the famous author. And she said, she wrote the books, Girl, Wash Your Face and Girl, Stop Apologizing. She said, most people don't fear failure. What they fear is having other people see you fail. And that makes sense to me. I mean, I don't relate to that because I don't mind if you see me fail, because I get the high in failure. Because if I'm failing, it means I'm learning. It means I'm testing, and I don't embarrass easy. I don't have any problem screwing something up because I learn a ton from that. In fact, that's the whole premise of my book series, is from mess to success. You learn more from your messes than you do your successes. And owners, leaders, entrepreneurs that can not just own their mess, but teach through them. You build a culture where people will take risks, and it's okay to fail because you're learning together and you're sharing this abundance of information. This is a great culture.
Yeah.
People don't quit those kind of cultures. They thrive in them.
Well, in my first book, I have these 7 pillars of what I think make a great company culture. These are things that we heard consistently from great guests on the show. And one of the pillars is mistakes. Yeah. It's like how companies deal with the mistakes they make. Yeah. Right. Versus errors. And I distinguish mistakes and errors are 2 different things.
Yes.
right? If you keep calculating payroll wrong because you don't know how to use a calculator and you can't add, that's an error and you probably don't belong in that job anymore, right? But making a mistake like, I tried this new software, I tried this new thing, we tried to get better, this didn't work, how do we fix that? What's the other, that's different. And I see so many great organizations just absolutely flourish using that model. And so
Chris,
many
you and I
meetings.
are like, you're like mental bosom buddies. When I was a sales vice president, I used to tell people my job is to receive and process bad news.
Yeah.
I do not want to hear wrong news, because wrong news means you phoned it in, you lied, you made it up, you didn't ask the right questions. Wrong news is unacceptable. Bad news is acceptable. It means you're trying, it means you're iterating. And that's a great culture, right? Low tolerance for wrong news, high tolerance for bad news.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Great way to put it. Well, I was wondering, is there one thing within an organization that you think can't be copied?
Oh, there's only one thing that can't be copied.
Okay.
There's
What is
only
that?
one thing, and you just mentioned it. That's your culture.
Hmm.
Everything else can be copied. Your board makeup, your supply chain, your operations, your go-to-market strategy, your pricing, your patents, your copyrights, they're all being copied. They're all being stolen from you right now, typically from countries across the Pacific Ocean, quite frankly. What cannot be copied is your culture. And your culture is simply how the vast majority of people behave the vast majority of time. Backbiting, gossiping, lying and stealing, cutting corners, or respectful abundance, great, courageous conversations, confronting blind spots. People don't quit bad jobs. They quit bad bosses and corrupt cultures. Really, in essence, your culture is just the relationships amongst your people. This adage that people are an organization's most valuable asset, Chris, that's total bunk. People are not any company's most valuable asset. It's the relationships between those people. Because you can have someone who's a black belt Six Sigma expert and a Rhodes Scholar from Oxford. You got the two smartest people in the room. But if they can't get along, compliment, forgive, pre-forgive each other, I don't need them.
Yeah.
I can teach skill. It's really hard to teach how to build a high trust relationship. That is somebody's killer app. That's your brand. It should be your brand, is that you can learn how to code. You can learn Google Analytics. I can learn how to send an email on Marketo. What I can't teach you is how to apologize, how to be self-aware, how to recognize in a meeting, now that's a great idea. In fact, that's a better idea than my idea. Why don't I abandon my idea and jump on board that idea? It's hard to teach humility and abundance thinking, but I'll take that person over the smartest person in the room every day of the week.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's humility, I think, is one that just runs really counter for most people, given our, especially in America, right? Given our American traditional values of how we perceive things and do things, and we want to win and be best and all this, right? But I think to your point, you have to take a step back and stop looking at it so specifically. It's not about being best and being right as you as the individual inside the context of work. If you look back and say, what's the best decision so we can win and be awesome as a company or as a team, right? And that's where the humility needs to come in. It is not about me winning. It's about the team winning or the company winning, and ultimately I'll be successful.
It's a fine line, isn't it? Because when I was the CMO at FranklinCovey for 8 years, almost 3 times the national average of that role in a public mid-sized firm, I had a mantra where I would say, I don't know who had that idea. I usually would not give credit to individual people, because I wanted everyone to know bad ideas, good ideas, outrageous ideas. We're all in this together. We all have a common mission here. But at the same time, people want to win. They want to feel valued. They want to win. They want to feel recognized, right? So it isn't like a democracy or a communist where no one gets to raise up, right? There's a fine balance between recognizing people's contributions and also making it safe to where everybody feels comfortable speaking up. And we're going to go with the best idea that's right for the business. We may have to take 2 ideas and run them simultaneously, like to your point. But I loved it when we would launch a product, and at the end of the initiative, no one really knew whose idea it was, because everybody was so invested in making the initiative successful for the firm. And everybody got promoted, everybody got raised up. And I recognize that, Everybody's career is unique to themselves. So it isn't like all of one or all of the other. It's kind of a nice symphony of recognizing contribution and also recognizing the team's goal is to make something work, not at the expense of anybody's one bad or good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your book, Marketing Mess to Brand Success, sounds like a very intriguing book. And I'm wondering if you feel like this is really meant for the individual from an entrepreneur, or maybe the single, chief marketing officer. Is this really meant for an individual to review? Or is this more of a kind of book that a corporation wants to look at bringing in, to the team, right? And is this more of a thought change for a group of people? How do you view what you've written as far as who it goes to?
I won't fall into the trap of saying my book is for everybody, because my friend Seth Godin has reminded me that's bunk, right? It's your smallest viable market, Scott. I think the sweet spot for this book is people who are in a marketing role. Well, whether that's your own company or you're in a firm, but you're building a career in marketing, because as much of it as it is a marketing book, which, by the way, I don't teach SEO or marketing automation, or I don't get nitty gritty. I talk about the politics of marketing and how marketing can thrive in an organization, how to build a career inside an organization. So generally, it's for people who are pursuing a degree in marketing. But I'll tell you who's buying the book the most. Who's buying the book are sales leaders, and they're handing it to their marketing team and saying, I need you to read this book. Let's talk about it.
That's really great. I know, and I can certainly relate there, because I often I'll speak at conferences and I'll have people in HR come up to me and be like, I love what you said. This is great. But how in the heck do I get my boss? How do I get the CEO to actually start doing this stuff? And I go, well, step one is maybe give a copy of the book and see if you can start a conversation about something there, It's interesting.
And I don't shame marketing in the book. I take sales to task. I take marketing to task, but I talk a lot about, hey, marketers, you need to be thinking about these things as well as these things, right? Because you can't just be in your own silo, unleashing your creativity, doing the things you love the most, right? You've got to be able to read a P&L. You've got to stay close to the cash. You've got to understand what the sales side of the organization needs to drive, forward profitable business. Otherwise, you're just, working on pet projects and doing things you love to do. Well, that's called the CFO coming in and clearing house.
Right. So, you've kind of given the long career that you had at FranklinCovey, and I certainly being able to work with the man himself as well.
Yeah.
What's maybe the greatest thing you learned while you were there?
Yeah, I'm very clear on this. Dr. Stephen R. Covey wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This book has sold 40 million copies. It's the most widely read book in the world around personal development. As the chief marketing officer, I led press and PR for the firm. Very common for a reporter to call me, want to interview me on the 7 habits of highly efficient people. The book is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, not the 7 habits of highly efficient people. There's a big difference between being efficient and being effective. One is not better than the other, but there's a time to be efficient and a time to be effective. And for your listeners and viewers that are like me, I'm a very efficient person. I wake up at 4 a.m. I go to bed at 10 p.m. I get more done by 10 a.m. than most people do in their days. I'm a very productive person. I don't apologize for it. And it's actually been the biggest hallmark of my career. The problem is when I take that mindset of efficiency, Chris, and I try to move it into my relationships with people, because you cannot be efficient with people. And people who are efficient, like me, generally try to do that. With people, slow is fast and fast is slow. So the biggest learning I took in 25 years at FranklinCovey, but I still am an advisor to the board and the CEO, is that for those of us who have efficiency as our brand, we're super productive. We've got to be thoughtful of when to be efficient and when to be effective, because you can only be effective with people. You got to slow down. You got to take off your Apple Watch. You got to close your laptop. You got to turn off your phone and check in, and not check off your relationships like you do mowing the lawn or checking the garbage out, or clearing out your inbox. It's a struggle for me. I have to like consciously move into an effectiveness mindset when I'm working with people. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
tend to be very robotic and productive and check things off, and people feel that, and it's not good for my brand or our relationship.
Well, Scott, I really appreciate you being on the show today. We've enjoyed learning more from you, and congratulations on the new book and all of your success. How can people find out more about you if they're interested in learning more?
Sure. You can go to scottjeffreymiller.com. That's my website. All my books, my podcast, my ink columns are there. You can connect to me on LinkedIn, on any platform, Instagram, Facebook. You can buy all my books on Amazon or any book platform. The current book is called Marketing Mess to Brand Success, and there'll be 8 more books in the Mess of Success title. The next one is Job Mess to Career Success, comes out in January 2022.
Again, Scott, thanks so much for being a part of the show today. We've learned a lot, and we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll bring in my second guest, Rick Girard.
Imagine buying a newspaper and discovering that the news you're reading is 6 months old. There isn't much that stays the same for 6 months, and the same thing goes for background checks. In a time when so much outdated information is being passed around, it's good to know that People G2 offers something different. At People G2, we provide today's intelligence, not yesterday's
Rick, can you
news.
talk real quick?
Our value-added approach offers you a fully
You're on mute.
FCRA-compliant solution that includes up-to-the-minute information. By combining industry-leading technology with old-school human investigation, People G2 is able to give you information that is accurate right now, delivered quickly through our online system or integrated with your HR system. So ask yourself, are you comfortable working with old news, or are you ready for a different kind of background check company? Visit peopleg2.com or call 800-630-2880. That's 800-630-2880 or peopleg2.com.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk Radio Show. In case you missed my first guest, Scott J. Miller, you can listen to his interview and any of our other past shows as well on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, or you can go to YouTube and follow me there. And the video version of these are also appearing there as well. So if you just subscribe, you'll make sure to always be alerted to when a new show is on board. You can also go to TalentTalkRadio.com and easily search and find our guests from over the years. And thank you everyone who's been tuning in and downloading and subscribing. Don't forget, you can also live tweet or follow the live tweet, and you can interact on Twitter following @PeopleG2 or the hashtag TalentTalk. There you can argue with us, tell us what we got right, what we got wrong, find links to profiles, books that we may have mentioned, or all the other good stuff that maybe you just couldn't write down as you heard it. So let's go ahead and talk about who my next guest is. He's returning to the show. Happy to have Rick Girard back on. He's the startup builder, CXO of Stride Search, host of the Higher Power Radio Show, and an author of Healing Career Wounds. So Rick, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Happy to be here. I have something in my throat. Just ate lunch real quick.
Well, that's always a struggle, right? Right before the radio shows, and make sure we're not too hungry or too thirsty. So
Totally.
So why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about you, what you focus on, what's important for our listeners to know about you for really the crux of our conversation today.
I'm on a mission right now to help change the thinking behind how people hire. Like that's really my mission. We work with a lot of startups, and what we realized is that people don't want the same things anymore in a career, or do they want from their employers? So we've actually developed this thing called a hiring operating system, and we call it Hire OS. And the whole idea behind it is to give small companies, give entrepreneurs and business leaders a system they could just plug into their business that will effectively tie people into their core values as opposed to just hiring for skills. Because as we all know, we've all heard many, many times, when you're a values-driven company and you hire for values, it's a much stronger hire than hiring for just pure skills alone. And so, yeah, I'm on that mission today just to talk to everybody and get people on board with just changing their perspective on how to hire people today.
And that's going to be, I mean, it's always an important issue. It's always something that's been going on. But yet I think we're about to have this big turnover, right? We're already seeing people quitting because they don't want to go back.
Yep.
They don't really like their job, but they didn't really want to leave during a pandemic. And then you have people who are like, I like my job, but I ain't going back in the office, or I'm not going back that many days a week. So I'll go find something else because there's plenty of companies willing to do remote. So I'm sort of going to expecting this huge turnover, right? And so companies are going to be doing a lot of hiring. So how should they think about changing it, right? You mentioned values, but what else should they be doing to really change that process if they want to get it right?
Yeah, you know what's really funny is we actually just did our podcast today on this same thing, right? So there was an article that came out where a lot of the employees from Apple just wrote Tim Cook a letter saying, "Hey Tim, you're not listening to us. We don't want to come back. You know, we're highly effective at home, and we want to stay home, right?" There was also a survey that came out that 40% of workers are going to quit if they have to go back to work, which again, what you're saying from a recruiting angle, what we're seeing is that people are asking very quickly in the conversation, well, if I were to make a move, I'd want to, you know, is it a remote? Is it a hybrid job? Like how many days am I expected to be on site? And that's a deal killer for some people now. So I think we've gotten used to this quality of life that, you know, that people didn't have before, and people are not ready to give it up yet.
Yeah. And, you know, we've already been able to attract some really great talent because we're like, yeah, we're 100% remote, right? And then they were evaluating us against larger competitors who might have been paying more money and giving them more opportunities. But as soon as we told them we're 100% remote, you don't ever have to come in the office, they were like, I'm in, sold.
Yep, exactly.
Where do I sign?
that coupled with the fact that you guys are also a core values driven organization. I mean, like you've got both, you know, it's a win-win situation, right? So I think when you find the right people that resonate with it and you provide a solution that works for that individual, you know, I kind of joke around. I'm trying to find somebody in like Sandusky, Ohio, you know, that I want to hire just because I'm a big fan of the movie Tommy Boy. But, you know, like I want people that are going to be the best people for the organization, regardless of where they went,
right?
Where they live, right? So,
yeah, and that's the really interesting part about remote work that we've been talking about for years. But this whole, you know, geography or bias around geography is starting to melt a little bit. There's still a pretty big iceberg there, but you know, it's starting to melt. People realize that they can have this, and I think as they maybe lose some people and they go, well, okay, maybe we're going to have a little more flexibility. And then they go, okay, but these people just moved from LA to Idaho or from, you know, New York into Connecticut, and they don't want to come into the big city very often. They're very happy where they are. And can we have, because I've always been able to get people who were awesome, who cost me a lot less money because they didn't live in a high cost of living city. And it was a huge advantage for us.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because my friend Ryan Malone did the same thing, right? Like he's the only person who actually lives in California. He's got a 100-person company that's 100% remote. They only come together for their annual conference that they do every year. And, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be able to kind of model and pull from kind of some of what he's done, and ridiculously successful model. So why not embrace it? You know, when you can pull people from all over the country, especially with the amount of people that moved. I heard something like 20 million people moved during COVID.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It'd be really interesting to see how that's going to impact, you know, politics, how that might impact work, how that might impact, you know, all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, if you suddenly people not what they were before, how does that change things? So
very true.
Yeah, time will tell. But I was really interested. I want to kind of make sure I asked you before our interview, you know, gets along too far, is what really inspired you to write the book, Healing Career Wounds? And can you maybe kind of tell us a little more about that and what people might expect if they hopefully go pick up a copy?
Yeah, you know, it kind of came out of our work that we do out of search practice. My core company is Stride Search, and what we do is we help find executives for primarily tech startups. And one of the things that I realized quite a few years ago is that the biggest problem in hiring is leadership. Leadership doesn't know how to interview. They don't know how to hire. They don't know how to really, like, there's never been classes they've been taught how to do these things. What we do is we've picked off kind of questions that we liked, maybe at an interview that we went to at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And you're asking questions to kind of get an idea of who that person is, but it's not really core to core values. It's not tied to core values. It's not really settled in anything. And so you're asking questions, but you're still really running a very biased interview process. And we're trying to eliminate all those things, right? So then what prompted me to write the book was that we've had quite a bit of success with a lot of different companies that we've helped to find executives. And what we ended up doing was building in this hiring operating system and then rolling out within their whole organization. So we train their people up so that they understand how to run an interview. We break it down to even like the simplest, like, we write pre-written questions and we assign them to the interviewer position. And so it's not really a whole lot of guesswork, but it's a lot of listening and digging under the hood. And so the idea was I wanted to have a plug and play book that somebody can pick up, they can plug it into their business and they can self-implement it, kind of like they do like an EOS or a scaling up or something to that effect. And as a matter of fact, it really plugs really well into like an entrepreneurial operating system. So that's the idea.
Awesome. And I know you're always trying to help entrepreneurs solve problems. It sounds like, hiring better, dealing with bias. Is there other things that you're trying to help them solve as well?
Yeah, a lot of it's kind of getting out of their own way, right? Because again, we don't know what we don't know. And a lot of times, I had this one scenario where I had to argue with the CEO over somebody that I recruited who was really good. The person had actually built a core product for his current company, and it was just time to move on for him. And when I sent the resume to the CEO argued with me, well, he doesn't come out of pedigree school. I'm not really that impressed by his background. I don't really know this company. And I had this really long conversation with him saying, hey, you got to get away from the resume and you got to look at what this person did. My evaluation or my assessment of this person is what they've done and the impact that they brought to the organization. And so essentially just being able to filter all that down to a point where you can be successful. You can actually understand how to extract the right data to gain support, to gain evidence to support whether or not you're going to make a hire. And we just don't know how to do that. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve. I'm a big believer that hiring is not an HR function, so to speak. It's a leadership function that goes down to HR. So strong leaders who know how to hire are going to have a strong company. But leaders who don't know how to hire, they struggle and they fail.
Right. And it seems like you've put your stake in the, claim into the startup arena. Where you're helping a lot of people. And I imagine this is the area where people need the most help because they have the least amount of support, the least amount of structure. Someone may have started a business because they have a great idea, but that doesn't mean they know anything about hiring and firing and all these other things, right? So why is it you think you've chosen this kind of startup area to be in?
Because being an entrepreneur is really hard. And I'm an entrepreneur. And when I say startups, I mean, startup to me is really anything that's not, that's not a mid-sized company that's like pre-IPO, maybe under 500 people. So again, I feel like entrepreneurs are my people. I resonate well with them, and I really want to give them the opportunities to win. Because what ends up happening a lot of times is they'll find a great person and that person will get bought by an Amazon or bought by somebody else. And it's kind of their fault. It's your fault when you lose people because you didn't really connect the dots in their brain as to how your opportunity heals their career wounds.
Right. And I've seen that so many times where we've hired someone, and I'm like, how did they ever let this person go? Right? How do they ever, how does this ever happen? They do such a good job, but things happen, right? So
Yeah.
maybe the company might have been going through something and they lost people they didn't want to lose. Someone could have been going through something personally and they maybe just couldn't give to the company what they were expected to give, or what have you. And so you're right, these wounds happen, right? These things happen in people's lives or in companies' lives. And when it's time to move on, I guess if we can find a job where it makes sense for that person, where they can heal, you're going to have a long, good, healthy relationship with that employee for a very long time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the number one thing that I hear from people that we talk to is, most people are not in a place where they can grow. And, I think leaders in general they're so focused on building the company and building the product and doing things that they're myopic on what's going on here, that they're not focusing on how can I grow Bill or Joe or Melissa, right? Like, how can I help them get to where they want to go? And so if the opportunity that we present to them does solve that problem, or it does help them get to where they want to go, or provides a path, then it puts you in a position where you can attract those people.
Right. And do you think that, people as a whole all do want to grow? Is that something you think people always want to do? Or is this more about us putting the right thing in place for each person based on kind of where they're at?
I think it's based on each person, based on where they're at, and what they tell you is their pain points, right? Everybody has, pain points. And there was this statistic that came out in 2019 through Gartner, which was 67% of people are disengaged in their current roles, meaning they're just there for the paycheck. So, and that's usually growth, content of the work, or management. Like, those are the top three reasons that I see, but there's other things. It just involves having a conversation and finding out exactly what it is that person needs healed.
Yeah, yeah. And, because we've seen that. I remember reading that one time in a book. I can't remember which book it was, but it might have been Marcus Buckingham or something. But just that, not everybody was looking to be on this path. Actually, it might have been Kim Scott in Radical Candor. That there were people that at times wanted to plateau. They wanted to their career to not get any busier or less busy. They just wanted to stay on this sort of plateau path because they had kids, because they were going back to school, because they had a sick spouse or a sick parent, or there was something else in their life, and they were happy to be plateauing for a while.
Yeah.
But wanted the ability to then grow and take off when they wanted to, if that, things changed for them. And that finally was like what I needed to explain to me, because we had many times we have awesome people that we were like, you do such an awesome job. Would you like to be now in charge of this thing? Would you like to do this? And they were like, nope. I'm happy. Like, I'm really happy. And it was like, what? Because like, I'm always like, go, 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 go. How next thing. And they were like, nope, I'm really happy right now. Can I just stay here? Okay. And I didn't understand it until later on I realized that like people can just be on these different trajectories.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, there are people that don't really want to grow, but maybe there's bad leadership, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they have they don't really gel well with the core company values. I see a lot of times where, people will talk about, well, our core values or they're on the wall or this, but it's really not that. It's, completely the opposite way. Right. So
yeah, it's
always up to the individual.
So tell me a little bit more about your Hire OS, which I think is your hiring operating system. What's that all about?
Yeah, so it's basically kind of 4 key components. It starts with core values, right? So breaking down what your core values are, understanding them, now taking those core values and building them into your interview questions and your job descriptions. And there's kind of 2 different components to that. Then from there, we move that through to the core values aligning with the second component, which is the discovery call, which is basically, when you get an applicant or you recruit somebody or somebody's referred to you, you do a discovery call, and it's a kind of a deep dive right off the bat, as opposed to, hey, what are you looking to make? And, what do you want to do? This is understanding somebody's pain, their desire, and what impact they've made in their current organization or former organization. And then when people are in alignment, that's to figure out whether or not people are positioned properly for the organization. And if they're positioned properly, then you move them through straight to an interview. And the interview is broken down, very structured. It's 45 minutes each person. It's usually 3, maybe 4 people at most. And each person is given 4 questions. Of those 4 questions, one of them is a knockout. And they're taught how to dig underneath the hood and understand kind of the core value that aligns with that question. So specifically driven between like usually 1 or 2 different core values, and they're behavioral questions. And so what we want to do is we don't want to understand how somebody would handle a situation, because those are hypotheticals. We want to understand what they've done in the past and how they handled it, how they felt about it, why they did it that way, what was the outcome, where did they fail. We want to understand all that good evidence to support whether or not it makes sense to move forward. So it's more evidential as opposed to circumstantial, which is what most interviews are. And that came from a lot of frustration, with hiring managers, talking to them and then saying, okay, well, how'd the interview went? Oh, it went great. I liked him. It's funny. We have something in common. He likes clowns. I like clowns. Let's hire him. And it was that kind of simple. But that's not creating diversity. That's not building an organization that's going to really thrive.
Yeah. I mean, hiring people that you would want to go have a beer with doesn't go very far. It doesn't last very long, right? You need people who can come in and do a great job and be great members of a team and help you drive your results. And if that means you never go have a beer with them, oh, well, that's not a great.
Well, especially in a remote work environment, are you gonna go have a beer with anybody? You can have virtual happy hour. That's about it. And then the last component is actually, when you get through that that interview stage, it's the offer and the acceptance. And, it's assumed as you go through, it's the process is controlled by the candidate. What would you like to do? Do you want to work here? Great. Okay. If so, let's talk about money then. So we try to keep the transaction to a minimum. People will join an organization based on all the other things just as strongly as they will, somebody who's just throwing a bunch of money at them.
Yeah.
It's a stronger tie.
Yeah. And so then I guess once they do that, right, and they figure this out, what do you expect the results to be, right? What do you expect that to look like for an organization that's really doing this, that's putting in this higher OS into place? Is it just getting better people? Is it higher profits? Is it, what does it look like, I guess, in that perfect scenario?
So what we're tracking is been, we've been hitting like a 98% success rate on offer acceptance. So when you put an offer out there, and you do it in such a way where you're letting them kind of determine what they'd like to do next, then they're telling you they want the offer. They're telling you they like to work at the company. It just creates a much heavier bond. And of those 98% of people that we've placed, we've got I think it was like 86% of them have been at an over 2-year stick rate. So I don't think we've tracked it much more than that, but there's been very little fallout. There's been a lot of, really good revenue that's been generated. We've done this a lot with a lot of startups, companies that we worked with in the past, and a lot of them had successful exits, and that's pretty key, being able to get yourself to a point. I think you're getting a much stronger hire than the traditional way. And also you're making better decisions, not relying on circumstantial evidence, but more based upon who's gonna really gel well and do well in your organization, who's gonna thrive.
Right. And all those things are really important. And I'm sure your system is the best, but even if it's not the best one, it's a really good system. Like my point is, like, if just having a system, having something in place that you can rely on and use to go through is so much better than having no system at all. I mean, I used to coach basketball, and I'm like, I could call the wrong defense for you guys, but if you're all running the right defense, we're gonna do a lot better than if you're all just doing whatever you want to do, right? We're not on the same page. So, having a system in place is super important. And it sounds like this one would be a great one for companies to consider using.
Yeah, there's, I haven't been able to find really any hiring operating systems that are out there, which is why we kind of built it and put it out there. But you're right.
So then it is the best.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I believe in it wholeheartedly. And the fact of the matter is, like, it's worked for a lot of our clients. It's just, it's actually, there's a bit of a mind shift because you really have to start looking at hiring from a different perspective. And then there's a training component. You have to understand how to dig underneath the hood and listen to people, as opposed to, having, talking to them or listening to respond, as opposed to, listening to understand. Mm-hmm. And so there's a pretty heavy training component involved in it as well. Yeah. But once you get it down, it's easy peasy, baby. It's like, but you're right. Any system, even if you don't use mine, is way better than, hey, we just have people come in, we meet them at Starbucks, and then we talk about what they like, what they don't like, and then we make them an offer. I mean, that's just a big waste of everybody's time.
Yeah, absolutely, and nobody wants that.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, I'm really glad you came back to share more with us on the show again, and always enjoy talking to you. So why don't you let everybody else know, how can they find out more about you? How can they talk to you if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can drop me an email at rick@stride, STRIDE, search, SEARCH.com. You can check out stridesearch.com or higherpowerradio.com. That's the podcast. Or you can pick up the book. It's called Healing Career Wounds. It's on Amazon. I was fortunate enough to get Gino Wickman, who's the author of Traction, write the foreword, which was really cool. And give me a call.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks again so much for being on the show. Hopefully, I'm sure we'll have you back again maybe next year and give us an update on everything you're doing. Other than that, thanks for everyone for listening to today's show. Don't forget, we're off for the rest of the month. We'll be back sometime in July. And look for me. I'll be roaming around the country, hawking my wares, my books here shortly. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Until next time, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today.